It was the night before Thanksgiving, 1971, and the airport was buzzing with holiday travelers rushing home. Flight 305, operated by Northwest Orient Airlines, was just a routine 30-minute hop from Portland to Seattle. Nothing about it seemed unusual until a man in a dark suit, clip-on tie, and sunglasses quietly took his seat and changed American history forever. He called himself Dan Cooper. No drama, no scene. Just a regular-looking guy boarding a short flight. But halfway through the journey, he calmly passed a handwritten note to a flight attendant. She assumed it was a phone number and tucked it away without a second glance. That's when Cooper leaned in and whispered something that made her blood run cold. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." She looked, and there it was, a demand for $200,000 in $20 bills, for parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting on the Seattle runway. To prove he wasn't bluffing, he cracked open his briefcase just enough to reveal what appeared to be dynamite wired to a battery pack. The pilot radioed a hijacking code. The FBI scrambled. By the time the plane landed in Seattle, the cash and parachutes were delivered as demanded. The passengers were let off safely, completely unaware they had just lived through what would become the most legendary unsolved crime in American history. With only a skeleton crew remaining, the plane took off again, heading south toward Mexico under Cooper's instructions. Then, somewhere over the dense forests of Washington state, in the pitch-black rain-soaked night, Cooper strapped on his parachute, opened the rear stairs of the Boeing 727, and jumped into the darkness below, taking his bag of cash with him. By the time the crew landed in Reno, Cooper had vanished into the night, without a trace. The search that followed was massive. Hundreds of FBI agents, state troopers, helicopters, and bloodhounds swept through miles of thick Pacific Northwest forest. They found absolutely nothing. No boot prints, no torn fabric, no broken branches. The man had seemingly dissolved into the trees. To make things more chaotic, the media accidentally misreported his alias. His boarding pass said Dan Cooper, but a clerical error turned him into D.B. Cooper, and that name stuck forever. The FBI chased over 1,000 suspects across decades. One man even confessed on his deathbed, but it turned out he was just lonely. Every tip led to a dead end. Every lead went cold. Then, 9 years after the hijacking, an 8-year-old boy camping with his family along the Columbia River stumbled upon something unusual buried in the sand. 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills, still bound with rubber bands. The serial numbers matched the ransom money perfectly. It was the first and only physical evidence Cooper had ever left behind, and it raised more questions than it answered. Had he died in the fall and the money washed downstream? Or had he deliberately planted it to mock the FBI? Despite an intensified investigation, divers, forensic teams, and all, nothing else was ever found. By 2016, after 45 exhausting years, the FBI officially closed the case and shelved it as one of the greatest unsolved crimes in history. But someone out there wasn't ready to let it go. Dan Grider, a retired commercial airline captain with over 24,000 flight hours and a YouTube channel about aviation, had been quietly obsessing over the D.B. Cooper case for years. Long after the FBI gave up, Grider kept going, studying flight logs, terrain maps, wind patterns, and declassified FBI files most people didn't even know existed. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing truth. And in 2023, more than 50 years after the hijacking, he followed a hunch to a dusty storage unit in Utah, one with ties to a man named Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. McCoy's name had circulated in D.B. Cooper circles before, but investigators had always dismissed him as a footnote. That was about to change dramatically. Inside that storage unit, buried beneath boxes of old books and forgotten memorabilia, Grider found a parachute. Not just any parachute. One with the exact military-style modifications documented in confidential FBI files from 1971. The same unusual harness clips. The same reinforced cord loops. Details so specific they had never been publicly released. And the unit had a direct connection to McCoy's family. The hairs on Grider's neck stood up. This was no coincidence. So who exactly was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr.? On paper, he looked like the American dream. A decorated Vietnam War veteran, a helicopter pilot, a devout Mormon, a devoted family man, and a law student at Brigham Young University. His neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and deeply religious. But just 5 months after D.B. Cooper vanished into legend, McCoy pulled off an almost identical hijacking. On April 7, 1972, he boarded United Airlines Flight 855 in Denver, handed a flight attendant a note claiming he had a bomb, and demanded $500,000 in cash for parachutes and a refueled plane. After receiving the ransom, he ordered the pilots to take off again, and somewhere over Utah, just like Cooper, he jumped. The FBI caught McCoy this time. He left his fingerprints on a water glass and a handwritten note in the cockpit. They arrested him at home in Provo a few days later, sitting casually with his family like nothing had happened. The parallels between his hijacking and Cooper's were staggering. The same aircraft type, the same rear stairwell exit, the same calm demeanor, the same note-passing method. Even the phrasing of the ransom notes overlapped in eerie ways. Many investigators immediately suspected McCoy and Cooper were the same man. But the FBI officially dismissed the theory, pointing to different physical descriptions. Witnesses described Cooper as being in his mid-40s, dark-haired, olive-skinned. McCoy was 29, fair-skinned, and clean-cut. Dan Grider, however, saw those differences differently. McCoy was military-trained. He understood strategy, deception, and misdirection better than almost anyone. If he had disguised himself once, he could easily do it again, aging himself up, darkening his appearance, changing his handwriting, altering the phrasing of his notes. These weren't inconsistencies. They were camouflage, and the parachute Grider found only deepened his conviction. Later, another parachute surfaced, this one pulled from the back of a closet in a grandmother's attic in Provo, Utah, tucked behind Christmas ornaments and faded photo albums. When Grider examined it, his hands trembled. The stitching, the rigging, the modifications, they all matched the 1971 FBI documentation precisely. He brought it to experts, who confirmed the details were consistent with what the Bureau had quietly noted decades ago. The parachute was shipped to the FBI lab at Quantico. Investigators began planning to exhume McCoy's body to extract DNA and compare it with evidence from the original hijacking, including the clip-on tie Cooper had left behind on the plane. But perhaps the most powerful moment of all came not from a lab or a storage unit, but from a phone call. Grider spent weeks reaching out to McCoy's children, Shante and Rick McCoy III, people who had spent their entire lives carrying a secret they never asked to hold. They had stayed silent for years, refusing every media request, protecting their family's memory.